Hey everyone, and welcome back to OntarioCyrptids. I hope you all are having a great day today. I'm going to keep it short and sweet as far as my commentary goes. As you know, I record these on a Saturday and I have a lot of things to get accomplished around the house. So let's get to it. As you know, today marks the 50th episode, which means I'm going to be thanking the following people for commenting regularly on my episodes each week. So, here we go, guys. Bender, Blah Blah, Gene, and Sky King. Now, Sky King is new, but he's commented over 3 times in my last 5 episodes. Anyways, thank you so much for your support. I truly appreciate it. I also appreciate that everyone else who comments, likes, and subscribes to this channel. Okay, today I will be sharing only 2 stories since the second story is a longer encounter. So go grab yourself a beverage and let's get cozy on the couch or chair and sit back and relax. All right, here's the first story, and it takes place on July 2004 in Mescalero, Otero County, New Mexico. So Mescalero is an Apache reservation, and it would appear that this is just one of many occurrences that transpires in and around the town of Mescalero. Around 11 p.m., my sister-in-law ran into my mother-in-law's house from outside, and she said something very tall was walking on the trail below the house. It walked back and forth on the trail below before it came up to the house and stood at the corner looking at them, which is when they went into the house and told me. We checked outside and around the front, but saw nothing. Later, while watching television, we heard some noise in the dining room, and I said, "What was that?" We jumped up to see, and some of the girls came out to see what the noise was. It sounded like somebody throwing stuff around in the room. When I got to the dining room, I saw a large hand reaching in the window. It reached across the table by the window and pulled out a bowl that had some food in it. Frightened, I called the conservation office, and nothing more has occurred. The thing has been hanging around this town for 2 or 3 years now. About 2 years before that, one of those creatures followed my brother-in-law home from a friend's house about 12 a.m. He saw it down the road about 150 yards away. He was scared and ran home, and when he got to the door, he started pounding on it. He didn't realize at the time that it had followed him, but when he looked behind him, he saw that the thing was standing there looking at him, and it was only about 10 feet away. That's when my brother-in-law ran inside the house. The creature left after 5 minutes. Another sighting was about a year ago at the same house. My mother-in-law went outside to get clothes off the line. There was snow on the ground. It was about 8 a.m., and she saw 2 tracks in the snow, very large set and a smaller set, like it had a smaller one with it. The tracks went between the house and the clothesline. Some of her clothes were on the ground. The tracks went down to the trees below her house. I live in a trailer home up the highway. The closest house is a mile away. One time I could hear loud screams 1 canyon over from where I live. One night we were here without any power and no dogs, and we were going to bed, and we heard a sound like a rumbling on the side of our room. It was like someone bumped our trailer with a car. It happened just once. I figured it was a Bigfoot because we've heard it around here. The neighborhood is on a hill above Highway 70 with many trees and bushes between our places. It would appear that the creature also lives in the area, and if you take a look at where Mescalero is situated, This reservation sits in a valley, and it is surrounded by beautiful mountains all around it. It looks gorgeous. In any case, it looks like they have, I would say, a family possibly living with them in that area as well. All right, so this story takes place July 1998, King County, Rattlesnake Ridge, Washington. Now, this is going to be the last story of the day because I took a look at it and it's fairly long, but you're going to want to stick around till the end because this is a good story. Now, let's get started. In the month of July 1998, my friend Jay and I went on a hiking trip at Rattlesnake Ridge to collect rocks for Jay's geology class at Seattle University. We reached a gravel parking lot around 1300. At the beginning of the trailhead, there is a lake that is very active with waterfowl and occasional birds of prey. Normally this trailhead is semi-popular, and we noticed there were only 3 other cars in the lot at the time. Looking back now, I can say that this particular day was odd in that we noticed no animal or bird activities which normally is abundant around the lake at the trailhead. Everything was strangely quiet, and an ominous feeling seemed to loom everywhere. In fact, normally both Jess and myself are quite talkative when we hike, and even we said very little to one another. Both of us had packed lunch in our backpacks, along with our usual flashlights, waterproof matches, extra batteries, 2 walkie-talkies, 1 cell phone, and 1 first aid kit. I was armed with my knife that is attached to my rucksack on the shoulder strap, as well as an H&K millimeter pistol, which I keep in my fanny pack. We started our hike on the regular trailhead until we reached the opposite side of the lake. At this point, we exited the regular trail and began ascending up the mountain, moving diagonally towards the rock face of the mountain ridge. After approximately 20 minutes, we came upon a small creek that flowed downhill towards the lake. We decided to follow the stream upwards as it seemed to be going in the direction of our destination. We followed the stream for approximately another 15 minutes until we ran across an animal trail that was also going in the direction we were heading. However, the animal trail was moving diagonally and had fewer obstructions in our path, both which made it easier to move up the mountain. Other than our own heavy breathing, we could hear nothing, and we said nothing as we continued our ascent. We continued on for what seemed like another 10 minutes when we began to hear a loud slurping sound ahead of us. We both looked at one another with a "what the hell" type of an expression on our faces while continuing upwards. The slurping grew louder, and now we could hear what sounded like a sigh in between each slurp. At this junction, the creek hooked around behind a hill in front of us and out of sight. Our trail would intersect with the creek once again just over this hill. At this time in the hike, Jay was ahead of me approximately 8 to 10 feet. Suddenly, as we came over this hill, Jay froze in his steps, and I came up behind him, alerted by his actions. As I approached him from his 6, I looked over his shoulder, and I also saw what he was looking at. In front of us, only 20 feet from our position, I saw what at first I thought was a huge bear drinking from the creek. As my brain tried to categorize the animal I was looking at, I suddenly realized that directly under its glutes were a pair of huge feet. Not hooves or paws, but actual feet, each having 5 toes. The feet were a dusty gray color with the same texture of the bottom of a dog's paw. As it knelt down, the glutes were as large as a Clydesdale's ass. I'm not kidding. With the exception of the sole of its feet, the creature was covered in 4 to 5 inches in length of dark brown, almost black hair. Its hair on its butt was all matted, and it looked like it had sat in a wet cowpea. Under his butt, I could clearly see testicles, and I knew it was a male. We stood frozen with fear. I could not feel my legs, and my skin crawled from the adrenaline running through my blood. I remember my mouth going dry and feeling numb all over my mouth and face. The smell of this animal was indescribable. It was absolutely horrible, and I could feel my gag reflexes twitching as I badly wanted to vomit. Jay's face was beet red and his eyes were watering as his hands was over his mouth, also trying to hold back the nausea feeling we had. He then tried to back up, pushing me back also, and we both tried to regain our balance while still keeping our eyes on this thing. It must have heard us moving because suddenly, in one quick motion, it jumped to its feet and spun around facing us in a defensive posture. As it did this, it made a loud bark type of sound that seemed to make the trees shake. It stood there with its fists clenched and its arms raised in front like a boxer. Its lips were curled, baring his huge horse teeth as it glared directly at us and breathed heavy. The bottom half of his face was dripping with creek water, and his eyes were black like a shark's eye. I stood there frozen out of fear and amazement of this animal's sheer size and agility. I'm 6'2", and I only came up to his midsection. I can only guess that this animal was between 10 to 12 feet in height. It was much higher than a basketball's rim and towered over us like we were children. I remember briefly thinking of grabbing my weapon, but even if I was able to empty my whole clip into him, he was still close enough to have been able to get us before he was neutralized. Therefore, all three of us just stood there for a good minute and a half or so and studied one another. I was absolutely in amazement at the incredible size of this creature. I remember every detail clearly as if it were yesterday, and I will attempt to describe the proportion of this creature the way I've seen it. First of all, the feet on this creature were massive and were approximately 20 or more inches in length. The toenails and fingernails were dark-colored with an orange tint to them. The creature did not have 1 ounce of fat on his entire body, and I could see the vascularity of every muscle that seemed like they would have straightened if it weren't for the hair that covered them. The calves were twice the size of my own head, and his quads were as big as a tree trunk and swept out like a bodybuilder's. I'm not kidding. Those legs looked like they could squat a full-size Dodge pickup truck. The glutes were huge and muscular and very high like a track runner's. They tied into these enormous hamstrings that gave the animal a very explosive look, like it could sprint at very high speeds. The waist was narrow and very powerful and solid looking. Above that, I could see this huge lats that flared out under his arms. His pectorals were wide and bulky looking. They were so big that they came up to his chin. I couldn't see any neck at all, but his traps and deltoids were what really caught my attention. First of all, the delts were as big as a beach ball, and connected to them were these huge traps that flared out and upwards. They went from his deltoids to his ears. The top of his head was conical, and these bulky muscles steamed down from the tip of his cranium to his traps, kind of like the back of a gorilla's neck. Now, the face was not like an ape at all. It really looked like a Neanderthal in the facial features. The face had less hair than the rest of his body, all except for this thick eyebrow that pointed upwards. He had no hair around his eyes or his nose. The forehead was sloped and the eyebrow ridges protruded out, and under them were these deep eye sockets that sank deep in its skull. The cheekbones were very wide and high, and below them was his deep, powerful-looking jawline. The nose had a ridge to it, like a human nose, and the nostril flared out and forward. They weren't pointed down like a human's nostril would be. When his lips relaxed a bit, I could see that he really didn't have any upper lip at all. It was very thin and his bottom lip was larger. The mouth overall was very wide, as was his face. His arms were huge and bulky, and you can see his triceps bulging out and his biceps looked like bowling balls. His forearms were abnormally long, and they too were bulging with muscles. His knuckles were huge, and the color of his skin was a cross between a black and gray. Believe me, trying to describe this creature does not even begin to do it justice. I wish I could somehow download his picture from my brain and put it on the screen to show you his enormous proportions. In 1993, I shot a 1,200-pound bull elk near Yakima. The creature we saw that day had twice the muscle mass as my elk did, and I guarantee you he weighed no less than 1,500 pounds, with a maximum weight of 2,500 pounds easily. Finally, we had enough, and the urge to leave grew very strong. We began backing down the trail, keeping our eye glued to the creature the entire time except to look where we were going periodically. As we backed away, his arms dropped to his sides, and he opened his mouth and let out a soft and deep bellowing sound, kind of like a gurgling moan sound that a male lion does to declare his territory. Long after he was out of sight, we could hear his bellowing as we began a rapid descent down the mountain. When we reached the opening at the bottom near the lake, we opened up into a full sprint all the way back to the car. We drove all the way to Bellevue, Washington, before we stopped for coffee to try and collect our thoughts. We didn't know how to begin to tell anyone what we had just seen. I don't think that I would have believed our own story if I hadn't seen it for myself. I don't know how this would help anyone, but I do feel better getting this off my chest. Okay, first I want to say I took the liberty to omit his friend's name and just call him Jay, but I think I let it slip once while telling the story. I think he did a great job in recounting this encounter story. The Bigfoot's description was very detailed, so much so I could probably sketch him out on paper from his description. The sheer size of him alone would have made me faint, no doubt about that, but a truly remarkable encounter. If these stories reminded you of an encounter that you may have had and would like to share, then please forward your stories to OntarioCyrptids@gmail.com. I would be honored to share your story on this channel. Also, as this gentleman stated, it might be even a therapeutic experience to finally get it off your chest. Thank you all for listening until the end. I truly appreciate it. Please hit the like button on your way out and subscribe to my channel if you are new. Have a fantastic Sunday, and we will see you all next week.